Welcome to Major Antonio's presentation of The Yankee Mining Squadron, or Laying the North Sea Mine Barrage, by Captain Reginald R. Belknap, USN. Preface.
In writing of the biggest mine-planting stunt in the world's history, to quote a Christmas greeting from Rear Admiral Clinton-Baker, head of the British mine-laying force, I have endeavored to make an account that would be readable enough for general interest, largely for the reason that, compared to other operations, our undertaking received scant mention at the time. Its very nature required preparation in quiet and precluded discussion of its progress. Unnecessary technical detail has therefore been suppressed, although much could be written that would be welcomed by those versed in it. The whole account is based on data obtained at first hand. The description of assembling the squadron for a mining excursion fits the third excursion rather than the first, but the difference is a minor one, affecting only the numbers present. 6 ships on the first excursion, 10 on the third. All the rest is correct, in substance and details. Besides influencing an early armistice, this great mine-laying operation marks an epoch in the use of submarine mines in warfare. It was an event in military history, as well as a prominent operation, and the credit for it belongs not alone to the officers and men who were actually present, but also to those of the old mine force, to whose services in developing, in our Navy, the art of handling and laying mines in large numbers, the success of the great operation was so largely due. Details of the mechanical development of the new mine itself have not been gone into, for obvious reasons. Justice to that part could be done only by those who were directly concerned in it, but I am glad of the opportunity to express appreciation of the valuable service which was rendered to our cause in the war by Commander S.P. Fullenwider, USN, in seizing upon and developing the long-sought means for such an undertaking, and by Lieutenant Commander T.S. Wilkinson, USN, and the officers and designing engineers in the Bureau of Ordnance and at the Naval Torpedo Station, Newport, Rhode Island, by their skill and ingenuity in designing mechanical features when normal experimenting was impossible. As for the ships, the personal study which Captain J.D. Buret, C.C., USN, made of the mine elevator problem was the foundation of its brilliant success, and the fact that, in the whole period of service, few alterations or improvements in the mine layers were found desirable, although suggestions were called for, is the best tribute to those who planned and carried out their conversion. Only very inadequate expression can be given here to my appreciation of the services of my staff, in particular Captain H.V. Butler, USN, whose excellent conduct of the flagship, supported by the indefatigable care of his navigator, Lieutenant Commander J.C. Cunningham, USN, made it possible to approach and navigate close to unmarked minefields in the open sea. And I was fortunate to have one so thoroughly loyal and capable as Commander B.L. Kanaga, without whose unremitting attentiveness and tactful management of countless details under difficulties, our performance would have been far less creditable. Inseparable from our recollections will always be the excellent and friendly official and personal relations with the destroyer escort, especially when HMS Vampire led. Captain H.R. Godfrey, C.B. DSO, writes, "It was the determination of every officer and man in the 14th Flotilla who had the honor of being entrusted with the screening of the U.S. mine-laying force that no preventable attack by enemy submarine or surface vessel should inflict damage on any ship of the force. It is but speaking for all of us to say, that is what we felt from the first moment of that gray morning's meeting on the day of arrival." Newport, 15th of June, 1919.
Chapter 1. The Mine Force Ready.
The national anthem at morning colors woke me, and I arose and looked out. What a glorious sight! Green slopes in all freshness, radiant with broom and yellow gorse, the rocky shore mirrored in the firth, which stretched smooth and cool, wide away to the east and south, and in the distance snow-capped Ben Wyvis. Lying off the entrance to Munlochy Bay, we had a view along its sloping shores into the interior of Black Isle, of noted fertility. Farther out were Avoc, a whitewashed fishing village, and the ancient town of Fortrose, with its ruined 12th-century cathedral. Across the firth lay Culloden House, where Bonnie Prince Charlie slept before the battle. Substantial, but softened in outline by the morning haze, The royal burg of Inverness covered the banks and heights along the Ness River, gleaming in the bright sunshine. And how peaceful everywhere. Canandaigua and Sonoma lay nearby, the Canonicus farther out, but no movement, no signal, no beat of the engines, no throbbing pumps. All seemed resting from those last 4 days of our passage overseas, which had all but done away with sleep. My responsibility for the safe conduct of the squadron had ended at 1 a.m. when it dispersed at the buoy, whence the routes to our bases at Inverness and Invergordon diverged. The captains taking the ships to their berths singly, Captain Butler was up until 5 o'clock, needing daylight to take the San Francisco all the way in. Turned in at last, his servant and orderly at 8 o'clock were 45 minutes waking him. The senior British naval officer, Captain H.F.J. Rowley, R.N., came on board early to give us welcome, and then we went to our own chief, Rear Admiral Joseph Strauss, U.S.N., commander of the mine force, whose headquarters were here at Inverness, U.S. Naval Base 18. After taking a look over the base itself, Captain Murfin's work and province, we stayed to lunch at King's Mills, a handsome place amid beautiful surroundings, bordering on the golf links, with gardens, tennis court, croquet lawn, and fishing brook, which Admiral Strauss, Captain Murfin, and some of the headquarters staff had rented. It was a satisfaction to everyone to see our chief so befittingly established, and this came out very effectively later, at a picturesque and enjoyable garden party given there on the 4th of July, an occasion which was being celebrated locally with unaffected cordiality. Altogether, we could feel ourselves fortunate in the beauty and attractiveness of our surroundings, and also, as we soon found, in the hospitality and kindliness of the people. The American mine force had come to Scotland, arriving May 26, 1918, to cooperate with the British in laying a great barrier of mines from the Orkney Islands across the North Sea to Norway. To provide for doing our share, the small mine-laying force which our Navy possessed on entering the war, consisting principally of the old cruisers San Francisco and Baltimore, had been augmented by 8 converted merchantmen. Only 6 weeks before, 5 of them had joined the San Francisco, the squadron flagship, at Hampton Roads, Virginia, fresh from the shipyards. The program for the newly organized squadron contemplated the ships being in Scotland, ready for a mine-laying operation, in 45 days from the time they left the shipyards. The work of conversion having been extensive and hardly finished, the new ships were very raw, having had but a few days to shake down. Troubles with engines and steering gear, lost anchors, fogs, and missing stores repeatedly interfered with training. Up to May 5, 1918, not a day had passed without a mishap or some forced alteration of plan. Instead of progressing to the rehearsal of a mine-laying operation by the squadron, we had been unable even to keep all together for a single whole day. Yet we were preparing for an operation in which, with the ships steaming close together, all must go like clockwork, for hours without interruption. Another week of training before going across would, therefore, have been amply justified, but the sense of urgency was too strong. Besides, our mine bases in Scotland needed the 500 men we were to bring them. So, after 4 hustling days and nights of final preparation, we had stolen away from Newport, Rhode Island, just after midnight of Saturday, May 11, 1918. Started at last, and thanks to cooperation far and near, better prepared than expected. There were a few quiet hours that Sunday morning, then fog shut in thick until next day. This was trying, so early on the voyage, but as we kept together all through it, the experience only gave more confidence. Next, one ship's steering gear broke down, and she just escaped a fatal collision. The third morning, the same vessel broke down altogether. Through lucky foresight, a powerful tug, Sonoma, was with us, which towed the disabled ship 150 miles until next morning, when the break was repaired. The submarines that soon afterwards appeared on our coast were known to be crossing the Atlantic now, so we had target practice next afternoon to be ready for them. Then I felt we could give a good account of any surface attack. Torpedoes, fire, and collision were what we had to fear. All the ships had mines on board, and since we steamed only 500 yards apart, an explosion in one ship would have involved the others. Crossing in our company was the big collier Jason, loaded with an aviation station outfit for Killingholme, England, which afterwards did good work. On the 10th day, heavy weather came on, and Jason disappeared in a black squall, rolling heavily and steering far off the course. She, being a sister of the ill-fated Cyclops, and no trace of her showing in 4 days, added considerably to the anxiety felt as we entered the active submarine zone. Radio calls brought no response. We had all but given her up when, at early daylight, just before the appointed rendezvous with the destroyers, she came lumbering up astern. And so, notwithstanding the many vicissitudes in 3,000 miles steaming, we met the escort with our number complete and right on the dot, in time and place. Our arrival off Inverness the following midnight, May 25th to 26th, 1918, made the mine force complete as to constituent parts necessary for the operation in hand. The Baltimore and Roanoke had preceded the others, making us 7. 3 more were still in shipyard hands, but there was no need to wait for them before beginning the mine laying. Between operations, the squadron was divided for loading, half at Inverness, Base 18, and half at Invergordon, Base 17, 30 miles away. Being intended for the storage and assembly of mines, all that we used came from America. These bases had scant means at first for assisting the ships. Their needs could be supplied from the Royal Naval Dockyard and 2 depots, under Rear Admiral E.R. Piers, R.N., and Captain Tancred at Invergordon, and Captain Rowley at Inverness, who were always cordially responsive to our requests. The motto for all American naval forces abroad, however, was to be self-supporting, and thanks to our provident first supply and to regular replenishment by the mine carriers, we had to draw on the British stocks for very little. After a month, the repair ship Black Hawk arrived. She took no part in mine laying, being always moored off Inverness, separate from the mine squadron and flying Rear Admiral Strauss flag, but her equipment of machine tools and repair material made the mine force normally independent in regard to upkeep. Except for docking, we asked very little of the British in the way of repairs. Upon one occasion, the soluble salt washers for the principal safety device of the mines nearly ran out, the local atmospheric conditions having caused many more to be used than estimated. No washers of the right size and kind were obtainable anywhere inside 3 weeks, and thus a shortage of these atoms, the size of a peppermint lifesaver, threatened to hold up the laying of 5,000 mines. The Black Hawk had a steam press, however, and could make a dye, and by the time they were needed, washers in plenty were ready, incidentally of better quality than before. While the ships were unloading the mines they had brought for overhaul on shore and were coaling and otherwise preparing for mine laying, the larger preliminaries were taken up at a conference of Rear Admiral Strauss and myself with Admiral Sir David Beatty, Commander-in-Chief of HBM Grand Fleet. Vice Admiral Brock, his Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Clinton-Baker, the British Rear Admiral of Mines, Captain Lockhart Leith, the head of his staff, and Captain R.A. Pound of the Admiralty, attended this conference, which was held on board the flagship Queen Elizabeth at Rosyth, Thursday, 30th of May, 1918. First came the subject of tactics, and I explained my plan to lay the mines with the squadron steaming in line abreast, ships 500 yards apart, making a trace on the chart like a music score. 3 vessels, later 5, would be laying mines simultaneously. When a ship had emptied herself of mines, her neighbor, ready and waiting while steaming alongside, would begin. At the end of the minefield, some temporary small buoys would be planted, by which to pick the field up later, to continue it. This plan was accepted without comment. The area to be mined having been publicly notified 2 months before, the enemy might have placed some mines there, on the random chance of damaging our force. The only arrangement practicable to meet such a contingency was for some of the destroyer escort to explore for mines ahead of the mine-laying formation as it proceeded. Only those ships would be fully protected that might be following directly in the wake of the searching destroyers. The main purpose being to discover the existence of an enemy minefield in time for the squadron to maneuver aside. A clear understanding was reached at the conference of the relation of the mine squadron and its escort to the supporting force. The mine squadron being lightly armed and of moderate speed, it would have been at great disadvantage against even a numerically weaker force of light cruisers, with their superior batteries and speed. Hence, the need of the support, which would consist of a battleship or battle cruiser squadron, or both, and of light cruisers, according to the estimated risk of attack at the time. If attack threatened, the mine squadron and its destroyer escort would seek safety in the direction ordered by the support commander. Otherwise, they would proceed on their mission and return to base afterwards, according to the program for that occasion. The destroyer escort would be of strength sufficient to ward off any probable attack by submarines or by surface vessels that might elude the supporting force and the regular patrols. The location of the first minefield was decided upon. Then further details were settled with Vice Admiral Brock and Rear Admiral Clinton-Baker for the first mining excursion, which was to be done by the American and British squadrons at the same time. Preparatory notice was to be given by the Commander Mine Force to the Admiral of the Grand Fleet at least 4 days before the time the mine squadron was expected to be loaded and ready for an excursion. Upon a second, definite notice, not less than 48 hours in advance, when it was certain that the squadron would be ready, a combined operation order would be issued by the Admiral, naming all the forces concerned and containing the instructions and intelligence necessary for all. After lunching on board with Admiral Beatty, Rear Admiral Strauss and I took our leave. We had a look at Holyrood Palace and a walk through Canongate Street that afternoon, returning to Inverness next day. Not enough material had yet been accumulated to assemble mines to fill all 7 mine layers present, but 3,400 would be ready in a few days, sufficient to lay a field 47 miles long, consisting of 1 row of mines at each of the 3 levels prescribed. A mine embarking schedule was made out accordingly to include San Francisco, Baltimore, Roanoke, Canandaigua, Canonicus, and Housatonic for a start on June 7th.
Chapter 2: The Need and the Means.
A barrier of high explosive across the North Sea, 10,000 tons of TNT, 150 shiploads of it, spread over an area 230 miles long by 25 miles wide, and reaching from near the surface to 240 feet below. 70,000 anchored mines, each containing 300 pounds of explosive, sensitive to a touch, barring the passage of German submarines between the Orkneys and Norway. This was the final 5 months' contribution of the American and British mining forces towards bringing the war to a close. To stop the enemy submarines near their bases before they could scatter on the trade routes would obviously defeat their campaign more surely than merely hunting them at large. That was the purpose of the Northern Mine Barrage, which, with the barrage at Dover, made it not impossible but extremely hazardous to enter or leave the North Sea. That many a submarine came to grief in attempting these barriers is now a certainty, and the establishment of the Northern Barrage, which many had thought impossible, ensured the early finish of the submarine campaign. The resumption of ruthless submarine warfare became a serious threat to the cause of the Allies, and at the time of our entry into the war, their situation was critical. How much more critical than the world was allowed to know at the time, Admiral Sims has disclosed in his The Victory at Sea. The relief brought about through the convoy system, in which our destroyers, the Navy's first participants, had a large share, was immediate and important. But the submarine menace was far from ended, and according to the best information, would soon be greatly augmented, while the increasing number of transports would offer the enemy more opportunities with the added horror of troopship sinkings in prospect. Of further measures, the most effective would be such a blockade as would keep the submarines in or from their bases. The British had already mined a large area north and west from Heligoland, but this obstruction was not insurmountable, for the Germans from nearby could always clear a passage through when wanted. In any case, until the Skagerrak passage were closed, the submarines might use that route without hindrance. 2 weighty reasons kept the Skagerrak open: unwillingness to violate neutral waters and the ease with which German forces could raid any barrier near their bases. It may be recalled with what sudden damage a small German cruiser detachment raided a convoy just outside the Skagerrak in October 1917. To be effective, therefore, any barrier must be beyond easy reach of a raiding force and cover the Skagerrak, and must also be far enough to the northward of the British bases not to hamper the battle fleets engaging with the enemy. Hence, the anti-submarine barriers should be one near Dover Strait, the other across the North Sea, from Scotland to Norway. The closing of Dover Strait, undertaken by the British Navy alone, needs no further mention here. Although the strong tidal currents there, frequent rough seas, and hard, smooth bottom were unfavorable for minefields, other means, such as a line of guard vessels moored not far apart and equipped with powerful searchlights, together with numerous active patrollers, were employed with a considerable degree of success. The northern barrage would be too long a front, and much of it too far from base, for effective patrol without a great number of vessels. A wide, thickly sown minefield, however, would watch night and day in all weathers without relief, and would be even more effective against passage submerged than against passage on the surface, because of the less wear and disturbance of the mines by wave action deep down underwater. Currents were not strong in the northern location, but the bottom lay as deep as 900 feet, whereas 300 feet had heretofore been the deepest water ever mined. Merely to provide the mines meant a large undertaking, besides involving an enormous quantity of the same high explosive, which was likewise in heavy demand for shells and bombs. Supposing the mines ready, the planting of so many would be a long and dangerous operation, employing all the Allies' existing mine layers indefinitely. And neither the British nor ourselves yet had a mine that was quite satisfactory for the prospective requirements. Our Naval Bureau of Ordnance, however, was intent on finding the means for such a barrier, so that when, in May 1917, among the many contrivances offered for winning the war, Mr. Ralph E. Brown, an electrical engineer of Salem, Massachusetts, presented his submarine gun for consideration, Commander S.P. Fullenwider, USN, in charge of the Bureau's mining affairs, saw that, although the invention was not suitable for naval purposes in the form offered, a new electrical device which it contained, if applied to the firing mechanism of a submarine mine, would result in just what we were looking for, a mine at once sensitive and far-reaching. Mr. Brown collaborated with the Bureau of Ordnance in developing the new mine-firing device. By July 1917, all doubt as to its practicability had been dispelled, and the Bureau of Ordnance was able to give assurance that, in urging the closing of the German bases, our Navy might offer the means. Extravagant claims were common in the field of mining inventions, and 3 years of war lessons in the perversity of mines made the British naturally skeptical of this American find. An experienced officer in mining was sent over to see, Lieutenant R.H. de Salis, R.N., who had received the DSO for some mine-laying on the Belgian coast. As the new device was put through its paces before him, the chill thawed out, and in 2 hours he had become almost an enthusiast. Upon his report, the British Admiralty took up the plan with active interest. Upon returning from London in mid-October 1917, Admiral Mayo of our Atlantic Fleet brought back the outline of a proposed mine-laying operation. The paper was quite informal, unsigned, undated, bearing in pencil across the top. Admiralty would be glad to learn whether Navy Department concur in the plans as shown. The field was to be 230 miles long, the distance from Washington to New York, divided into 3 parts. The middle section, of 135 miles, called Area A, allotted to us because the reach of the new American mines was greater than ordinary, 3 of them covering the same extent as 8 mines of other types. Thus, numbers and effort were saved. There would be 3 systems, each consisting of 1 or more rows of mines just below the surface, dangerous to any craft, and other rows at intermediate and extreme depths, so that, whether running on the surface or at ordinary submergence or as deep as 240 feet, a submarine had the odds against her. In the absence of patrol vessels to drive them down, submarines would naturally run on the surface, and so the rows of upper-level mines were made more numerous than those at deeper levels. The stroke of a mine is sudden and powerful, and while a vessel on the surface may survive it, to a submerged submarine it is usually fatal. All classes of vessels shy at a minefield, and that the Germans shared this aversion was shown by captured papers, which made it clear that the submarines dreaded nothing so much as mines. The scheme was unprecedented, and that its great magnitude would involve a mass of detail requiring very careful adjustment was evident on the most cursory examination. Some who heard of it regarded it as impossible and foolish to attempt. As to the new mines, the very basis of the whole project, since a complete unit would not exist for several months, the statement of Rear Admiral Ralph Earl, Chief of the Naval Bureau of Ordnance, that the mines would be forthcoming in season, had to be based upon tests of the mine only by parts, with the assumption that all would function properly when assembled. Action upon that assurance would at once involve upward of $40 million, which made his stand a bold one, inviting unmeasured odium, should the mine after all fail. To await the mine's final proving, however, would have been fatal to any possibility of beginning the barrage before 1919. The task of laying the barrier would be hazardous in itself, with constant danger of interruption by the enemy. A single minefield in the open sea, or widely separated ones, presented no extreme difficulties, but to lay a series of them so close together as to leave no considerable gaps between made a problem for which no really practical solution was yet visible. For 4 days, the project was under consideration by the Naval General Board at Washington. Time pressed, the need was great, the new mine very promising. The attitude of our officers was favorable. My own expressed view, based on 3 years' experience in mining, was that, though much greater difficulties and magnitude would develop even than yet foreseen, the scheme was nevertheless feasible, was within our mine-laying experience in principle, and though it could hardly be more than half or a quarter effective, it was well worth doing. The British Admiralty's approval and belief in the practicability of the scheme was implied in the original paper, but an explicit confirmation was asked and obtained by cable on the basis of their 3 years' war experience and knowledge of North Sea conditions. And so the plan went to the Secretary of the Navy, bearing the General Board's approval, as promising a sufficient degree of success to warrant undertaking it.
Chapter 3: The Bases in Scotland.
The British mine-laying squadron was to operate from Grangemouth, near Rosyth, on the Firth of Forth. As a mine-assembling and operating base for the American squadron, the British naval authorities decided on Inverness and Invergordon in the Scottish Highlands, situated on Inverness Firth and Cromarty Firth, respectively, which empty into Moray Firth about 8 miles apart. One base would have been enough, and in some respects more convenient, but the limited transportation means across Scotland necessitated 2. To require the slow mine carriers to navigate the difficult passages around the north of Scotland would prolong their exposure to submarines and cause more escort duty for destroyers, so it was decided to discharge their cargoes on the west side, at points which gave a short haul across Scotland: Fort William, at the western terminus of the Caledonian Canal, and Kyle of Loch Alsh, where one crosses to the Isle of Skye. The cargoes were transported by canal motor barge and by the Highland Railway. In order to issue mines to the ships ready in all respects for planting, the bases needed a large number of men for shop work, besides others for transportation, police, clerical work, messmen, and sanitation. The entire establishment on shore was under Captain O.G. Murfin, USN, who had 20 American naval officers and 1,000 enlisted men at each base, 3 officers and 60 men at each of the unloading points: Fort William, actually at Corpac Village, and Kyle. Headquarters was at Inverness because of its superior communications and more central location. Captain Murfin had sailed November 13th for England to supervise the preparation of the bases. With him had gone Commander T.L. Johnson, then commanding the small mine-layer Dubuque, who was to inform himself fully on the situation and return to Washington as soon as practicable with answers to a long list of questions, everything we could then think of as useful to know for intelligent cooperation in the preparations. The large, substantial stone buildings of 2 idle distilleries, Dalmore, 3 miles out from Invergordon, and Glen Albyn at Muirtown, where the Caledonian Canal locks out to Inverness Firth. Clean, dry, and well ventilated, gave excellent living accommodations for the men. The smaller buildings made suitable offices, but considerable additions were made for messing, cooking, and washing arrangements. A YMCA hut was established in each base, and at Inverness the little Muirtown Hotel was transformed into a small hospital. This and similar provision at Dalmore, all under Captain E.J. Grow, MC, were for mild or emergency cases. The main dependence for hospital care was Strathpeffer, a hydro cure in peacetime, 20 miles from either base. There, a U.S. Naval Base hospital of 1,000 beds had been established under Captain E.S. Bogert, Medical Corps, with the Leland Stanford Unit. The buildings for mine assembly and storage were erected on adjacent vacant land, spur tracks being brought in from the main railway line, thus making good communication between the two bases, as well as with their receiving sources and shipping out points. Most of the machine tools and other shop and office equipment, as well as furnishings for the men's use, came from the United States. Some dredging was done in Inverness Firth to admit our mine layers into Bowley Basin, near the canal entrance. The navigation marks for entering the Firth were improved, because ordinarily vessels of our size seldom came in there, and then only by day. In addition, the whole length of the Caledonian Canal was lighted, for night navigation by the mine carrying lighters. Labor was scarce in the Highlands, and the weather that winter was severe. The work went slowly, delayed considerably beyond expectation. Captain Murfin had many discouragements and disappointments in deliveries from the United States. In spite of the kindness of all about him, he must often have felt very far away from home. But afterwards, the frank admiration repeatedly expressed by all visitors to the bases must have repaid his 6 long months of effort. In the end, the bases were ready in time, and their capacity and the rate of transportation as well were twice the original estimate. The two bases together being capable of assembling 1,000 mines a day ready for planting. Sending over the base personnel began with small drafts in December, but as accommodations for the full number were not ready soon enough, and the demand to use all transportation for troops became pressing during the Germans' Great Drive in March 1918, the base complements were not more than about 2/3 full when the mine squadron sailed from the United States coast in May. The greater part, 750, of the number then lacking had therefore to be brought over by the squadron. Though this retarded the proper organizing of the base personnel, it did not delay the mine laying.
Chapter 4: The Supply of Mines.
In the same past 6 months, other preparations, too, had been pushing ahead, both at home and abroad. Providing the mines, the task of our Naval Bureau of Ordnance, would alone make a story of great interest. Considering how long it had taken to develop previous types of mines, to have made a success of an invention that was new since our entering the war was indeed remarkable, the more so from inability to test a single mine complete before ordering 100,000. Mines for the open sea in great numbers, moored flying, that is, by ships steaming at considerable speed, need anchors with automatic depth regulation. Such mechanism had undergone important changes during the war, and the new American mines needed all the improvements to make them sure to plant at the intended level. They were to be much deeper than ever attempted before, and also in deeper water. 3 British officers of considerable mine experience assisted here: Lieutenant Commander H.O. Mock, RNR, Lieutenant R.H. DeSalis, RN, and Lieutenant Commander Harold Isherwood, RNVR. The last was an expert designer and had an important part in planning our new mine anchor, which was similar to a late-model British mine anchor. A submarine mine of today consists of a mine case shaped like a ball or egg, about 1 yard in diameter, mounted on an anchor in the form of an iron box about 30 inches square, connected by a wire rope mooring cable about 3/8 inch in diameter. The mine case contains the charge of high explosive, 300 pounds of TNT in our mines, and the firing mechanism. The combination stands about 5 feet high and weighs 1,400 pounds. 4 small car wheels on the anchor run on steel tracks, allowing the mines to be easily moved along the decks to the launching point. When the mine dives overboard, the mine and anchor come to the surface and float for a time, still held together, part of the mine case above water. Outside the anchor is a 90-pound plummet containing a reel of 1/8 inch diameter steel wire, plummet cord, made the same length that the mine is to be below the surface. Thus, if the mine is to be 160 feet beneath the surface, the cord is made 160 feet long. The plummet drops off when the mine goes overboard, unreels its cord, coming to the end with a jerk that trips the slip hook which holds the mine and anchor together. The pull on the cord also lifts the latch on the reel inside the anchor, allowing the mooring wire to unwind. The nearly solid plummet tends to sink faster than the more bulky anchor, thus keeping the cord taut until the plummet strikes bottom. The cord then at once slackens, releasing the latch, locking the reel, and preventing any more mooring wire unwinding. The anchor, continuing to sink, pulls the mine under until the anchor strikes bottom. The mine is thus finally moored, always at the desired depth beneath the surface, no matter how irregular the ocean bed may be. The mine cases are buoyant enough to pull straight up from their anchors ordinarily, but in a current they are swayed away from the vertical, which dips them down somewhat deeper than intended. For this reason, any locality where the currents are strong is unfavorable for a minefield, one of the difficulties the British Navy had to contend with in closing the Dover Strait. The new mine having, by October, been carried past the experimental stage as to its principal features by the Naval Torpedo Station at Newport, Rhode Island, some important mechanical details of the mine yet remaining were now worked out by the Baltimore, Captain A.W. Marshall, working directly under the Bureau of Ordnance. By the time complete units were ready, the Baltimore had been sent abroad, so the proof testing devolved upon the San Francisco, Captain H. V. Butler. This came in March and April. No throw of the dice was ever watched more intently than those first proof tests. Upwards of $40 million had been staked on them and were already half spent. Results on the first day made us feel easy, but it was 2 days more, from various delays, before we succeeded in exploding a full-loaded mine. This had been planted in Chesapeake Bay, well marked and guarded, in the very same deep hole where a whirlpool effect troubled the German submarine Deutschland on her first return trip. It was not possible to place the mine far from the fairway, however, since the water elsewhere was not deep enough for our purpose. Early the second morning, the battleship Arizona came along, heading too near it. The signal, "You are standing into a minefield," sent her rudder hard over and engines full speed astern. We could see the mud stirred up from 2 miles away. Since we could not get the mine up, what a relief it was when it was set off at last by sweeping. The final proving of the mine as a whole, which was completed in April off Cape Ann, did not take place until after several cargoes of mine parts had been shipped abroad, but the mine's success from its first trials showed how careful and observant had been all those who were concerned in its designing and testing. The prospect in October was that the shipment of mines would begin in January, but through delay in completing the detailed plans and from the abnormal industrial conditions prevailing, these shipments did not attain a regular flow until May, so that the ships and the mines were ready together. Secrecy, as well as timely delivery, caused the manufacturing to be partitioned among 500 contractors and subcontractors, some of them as far west as the Mississippi. Certain mine parts from different makers were put together by still others, and all parts flowed toward Norfolk, Virginia, the transatlantic shipping point. Planning this dividing up, placing the contracts, and arranging for the inspection of all, taking into account the transportation involved and the many different kinds of firms. Wire rope makers, automobile concerns, foundries, machine shops, electricians, die presses, and even candy makers. It was indeed a complex web. What tireless industry and what endless patience under pressure went into this work, only Commander Fullenwider and his assistants can fully appreciate. A large plant to charge the mines with explosive was built alongside the Naval Magazine at St. Julian's Creek, near the Norfolk Navy Yard. This plant was of capacity larger than any other of the kind, ample for handling 1,000 mines a day. The high explosive was melted in steam kettles to about the consistency of hasty pudding and drawn off, 300 pounds of TNT at a time, into the mine spheres. An automatic device shut the flow off at the right weight, and a mechanical conveyor carried the mines along slowly to the pier end, by which time they would be cool enough to load into the waiting ship. Hot work around those steam kettles through the long summer. A quiet but important corner, handling 25 million pounds of TNT with constant risk from fire. Several of the sailors were overcome by the kettle's poisonous fumes, and one died. The duty was monotonous and inconspicuous, but was done with praiseworthy faithfulness.
This concludes today's reading of the Yankee Mining Squadron by Reginald Belknap. Join us also the day after tomorrow for the subsequent part. Subscribe to Major Antonio's channel. Thank you for listening, and so long.